You walk into a beautiful house. Everything looks perfect on the surface. Clean lines, polished floors, expensive furniture. But deep down, something doesn't feel right. You can't explain it, but the energy is off. And here's the truth. That uneasy feeling, it's not just in your head. Sometimes the most expensive homes are the ones quietly draining the most fortune. Welcome back to New Day Mindfulness. Today, we're uncovering 5 subtle design mistakes that might be silently sabotaging your financial well-being, your focus, and even your peace of mind. These aren't about superstition, and you don't need incense or lucky charms. These are real, practical environmental patterns that shape how energy and results move through your life. Before we dive in, take just 3 seconds to help me grow this channel. Click like, tap subscribe, and share this video with someone who could benefit. I'm aiming for 2,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing high-quality, useful content directly to you. Thank you for supporting this journey. Back to today's topic. You see, we often think of success as something that comes from the outside. More effort, better strategy, new connections. But we rarely look inward, to our own space. Your home is more than a place you sleep. It's an energetic blueprint. Its layout, lighting, even its forgotten corners. These things have a subtle but powerful impact on how you think, feel, and operate every single day. Today, I'll share 5 design traps I've seen over and over again. Mistakes that many people don't even realize are affecting their finances and mental clarity. These are things you can fix without remodeling or spending a fortune. Simple, small adjustments that unlock better flow, more focus, and greater financial harmony. Here's what we'll look at. How a broken or missing center in your home disrupts stability in your life. Why living at the end of a cul-de-sac or alley could be working against your success. What misplacing a water feature might be doing to your money flow. The real impact of low natural light and how to reverse it quickly. And finally, the high price of buying a home for image rather than alignment. Stick with me through to the end, because I'll also share 5 simple prosperity-supporting features you can bring into any home, whether you live in a tiny apartment or a dream villa. Let's stop letting our spaces work against us. Let's make them work for us. Quietly, consistently, and intentionally. All right, let's begin with the most common but overlooked money-draining layout I see all the time. The missing or misused center of the home. Section 1, broken center shows broken stability. The center of any structure carries more than architectural weight. It holds psychological and energetic significance that quietly shapes the daily experience of everyone living within its boundaries. In the design world, this is often referred to as the core or anchor of the home. But in classical Feng Shui, the center is the heart of stability, symbolizing balance, grounding, and overall cohesion. When this center is missing, obstructed, or improperly utilized, the effects ripple outward, not only through the physical layout, but into the behavior, clarity, and life results of its residents. Homes with broken centers typically fall into a few categories. First are properties with irregular footprints, L-shaped, T-shaped, or cross-structured layouts, where the central square is physically removed from the floor plan. These homes might appear charming or unique from a design standpoint, but they often come with unseen consequences. Energy, or what we might understand as movement, coherence, or attention, fails to gather and stabilize. Instead, it gets pulled outward in multiple directions, never quite resting. A second common issue involves homes where the central point exists but is misused, occupied by a bathroom, storage closet, laundry room, or in some cases, an internal staircase that draws attention downward. These placements, though often accidental or aesthetic, symbolically represent downward movement or cleansing processes, which, when sitting at the energetic center, can translate into instability, wastefulness, or an inability to build long-term structure in one's life. When individuals live in such environments, their psychological patterns tend to reflect what their homes physically represent. They may feel unable to center themselves in a metaphorical sense. Many report chronic indecision, trouble focusing, anxiety about the future, or feeling like they're being pulled in many directions without clarity. From a financial standpoint, these individuals often experience inconsistent career paths, frequent job shifts, delayed promotions, or business ventures that struggle to gain traction. They may pursue opportunities that look promising but fail to materialize, much like how a house with no center fails to hold energy. It's not uncommon to hear people in these homes describe their lives as busy but directionless, a clear symptom of energetic diffusion. Over time, this instability can also influence health, particularly issues related to digestion, sleep, and the nervous system, all of which are linked to how the body processes and stabilizes information. Architecturally, the center of the home corresponds to what many cultures would intuitively consider sacred space. It is not always about visibility, but about symbolic anchoring. In traditional Asian homes, for example, the central room would often be used for family gatherings, daily meals, or ancestral altars. In Western architecture, classic villas and courtyards were often built around a defined core, an atrium, fireplace, or garden. These were not just aesthetic choices, but intentional acts to create gravity within the home, a literal and symbolic sense of rootedness. When that gravitational core is removed or ignored, the structure loses cohesion, and so does the psychological state of its occupants. Modern real estate, however, increasingly prioritizes function and style over flow and symmetry. As a result, many homeowners unknowingly purchase properties with compromised centers. Often they'll remark that the house feels open or airy, yet their lives become increasingly fragmented. This disconnection isn't always immediate. It often shows up slowly, subtle at first, then persistent, missed deadlines, frequent travel with no rest, constantly starting projects but never finishing them, difficulty building long-term relationship or routines. These behaviors may seem like personal flaws, but in many cases they are reinforced or even triggered by the environment. Fortunately, these issues are not irreversible. Even if you live in a home with an irregular shape or a compromised center, there are practical and accessible solutions that can restore balance and help recenter your space. One of the most effective ways to symbolically anchor a missing or misused center is through the use of square or symmetrical design elements. A square rug placed near the geometric center of the home, even if slightly offset, can serve as a psychological and energetic grounding zone. Choose earthy tones, beige, sardine olive, or terracotta to reinforce the sensation of stability. Layer it with a low-weighted coffee table or stone sculpture to create downward gravitational pull. These additions may seem minor, but can dramatically affect how the space is perceived and how energy behaves within it. Lighting also plays a key role. Overhead pendant lights or centrally placed ceiling fixtures, especially those that cast warm, diffused light, can draw focus toward the center and give the home a subtle point of cohesion, especially in layouts that feel too stretched or open. Avoid harsh directional lighting in the center, as it can create a sense of tension or spotlighting, which works against relaxation. In homes where the central point is occupied by a bathroom or closet, consider enhancing the surrounding area. Use mirrors on the external wall of the central space, not facing the bathroom door directly, but offset, to reflect symbolic expansion. Hang symmetrical artwork that incorporates grounding imagery, trees, mountains, or landscapes. If the bathroom must remain at the center, maintain cleanliness rigorously. Use grounding scents like cedar or sandalwood, and consider installing a small concealed plant on an adjacent wall to counteract downward energy with upward growth. In homes with stairs running through the middle, energy often gets pulled downward, which may lead to feelings of depletion or a sense that success constantly slips away. In such cases, paint the stairwell in lighter hues and install handrails or balusters that feel sturdy and supportive, both visually and physically. If the space allows, place a grounded object, such as a ceramic vase or weighted trunk, near the base of the stairs to catch falling energy and redistribute it laterally into the rest of the home. Perhaps the most overlooked remedy is the psychological commitment to reclaiming central space. Even if your home's architecture doesn't offer a perfect center, your intention can. Set aside one area, perhaps just a small table, low shelf, or floor cushion, as your centering point. This could be a place where you read, think, write, or rest, not a place of activity, but of stillness. Over time, this ritual space sends a signal to your brain. This is where clarity begins. This is where I find direction again. It doesn't require expensive design, only intentional placement in regular use. In homes where this concept is applied with consistency, many people report improved focus, better sleep, and a greater sense of rhythm in their schedules. Their goals feel more achievable. Their choices feel less reactive. Their mood steadies. These are not coincidences. They're the natural result of an environment that no longer pulls them apart. Real estate agents rarely mention energetic flow in listings. Architects don't always consider how subtle design impacts emotional and financial well-being. But as homeowners or renters, we have the power to reframe how our space functions. A stable home isn't built solely on foundation and roof lines. It's built on internal order, visual clarity, and symbolic intention. The center is more than physical, it's psychological. And when that center is honored, life begins to align around it. This is why no matter the size or value of your property, the first step to building lasting prosperity and clarity is not outside. It begins at the core. Section 2, End of Alley Energy Stagnation. In residential design, location is often spoken of in terms of convenience, prestige, or proximity to amenities, but rarely in terms of energy flow. Something architects overlook, yet people feel deeply without knowing why. One of the most consistently problematic locations from a flow perspective is the house at the end of an alley, cul-de-sac, or narrow drive, a site where all visible movement comes in but nothing seems to go out. From a Feng Shui standpoint, this configuration creates what's known as trapped qi, or stagnated energy, a scenario where potential enters the space but has no momentum to continue. Imagine pouring water into a narrow bottle with no outlet. At some point, the liquid pools and stops moving. Similarly, when energy enters a property with no outlet, it becomes stuck, compressed, and heavy. That stagnant energy, while invisible, begins to manifest in real life as professional plateaus, financial blockages, emotional inertia, and difficulty making forward progress. People who live in homes situated at the end of narrow streets or enclosed cul-de-sacs often report feeling like they're working harder than ever with minimal return. Promotions get delayed without reason. Job offers fall through at the last minute. Businesses attract early attention but plateau. Even relationships in such homes tend to experience friction. Not explosive conflict, but a grinding sense of repetition and emotional wear. These are not dramatic symptoms, which is precisely why many people live with them for years without realizing the root issue lies in the structure of the place they inhabit. There are telltale signs that a home is experiencing energy stagnation at the entrance. Visually, the front yard or facade may feel compressed. Walls close in from either side, plants overgrow around the gate, or the doorway is partially obscured by shadows or fencing. There is little or no natural wind or light movement at the threshold. When air can't circulate and light doesn't reach a space, that zone becomes energetically dead. From a neurological standpoint, our brains associate tight, dark spaces with caution or withdrawal. Over time, this physical configuration creates a low-level sense of contraction in the mind. It becomes harder to think expansively or take risks, even when the conditions outwardly seem fine. You may notice yourself second-guessing opportunities, feeling uninspired, or waking up already tired. These are not personal shortcomings. They are spatial signals. Energy trapped at the entry of a home influences everything that happens inside it. It's not just where you enter physically, it's where your ideas, motivation, and relationships enter too. To restore flow in such properties, the goal is to symbolically and functionally invite movement at the front. One of the most effective tools is warm-tone lighting installed around the entrance, on the ground, around the doorway, or even directed upward. Lighting activates dormant corners, creates a visual invitation for chi to circulate, and generates a subtle sense of warmth and activity. The brain reads well-lit areas as safe, dynamic, and expansive. This isn't just about brightness, it's about tone. Use lights that mimic morning or sunset hues, amber, soft gold, or candle white, to evoke momentum without harshness. Another powerful remedy involves vertical greenery, particularly upward-growing plants like lucky bamboo, rosemary, or Italian cypress. These species create symbolic ascent, inviting the eye and energy upward and outward, rather than letting them sink or stay confined. When placed in pairs at either side of the entrance, these plants simulate an energetic gate. They turn a dead end into a passageway. Even if the street physically stops, energy perception changes, and the house begins to regain vitality. Ventilation also plays a critical role. Many homes at the end of alleys lack airflow because of their position between taller buildings or narrow lanes. To compensate, install small, openable windows, venting grills, or decorative gaps that allow breezes to enter and exit, especially on both the front and rear sides of the house. The principle here is that air must circulate. If your home has only one open face, airflow stagnates, just like energy, ideas, and income. You'll notice that simply opening windows, trimming back plants near the entry, and maintaining a clean, bright doorway can dramatically alter how people feel upon entering. Not just guests, but you. These shifts signal movement, and movement is the core requirement for opportunity to find you. It's also important to keep the path to the door unobstructed, not just physically, but visually. Avoid shoes piled outside, dead plants near the step, or oversized furniture near the threshold. These block entry, not only for guests, but symbolically for growth. Create a space that breathes. Consider this. When we look at individuals who operate at a high level, people who consistently innovate, create, and expand, we often find that their homes mirror their mindset. Take Elon Musk, for example. Known for relentless forward movement and boundary-breaking ambition, Musk has never been one to confine himself to traditional structures, not in business and not in real estate. A closer look at his home choices shows a clear preference for openness. His earlier homes in Bel Air were situated on expansive, open-view lots, not at the end of corridors, but with multiple visible lines of energy flow. Even after selling those properties, he moved into a small, modular home located in wide, flat land with panoramic horizons. Why does that matter? Because layout reflects mentality. He often speaks of valuing open architecture, fluidity, and unrestrained access to possibility. This principle mirrors his physical space. No dead ends, no visual blockages, no energetic compression. That's not coincidence, it's alignment. Success isn't just about mental clarity, it's also about spatial support. If you live at the end of an alley or cul-de-sac, you don't need to move to change your results. You just need to unstick the energy that's become trapped at your entry. Start by walking outside your house in the early morning or late afternoon and ask yourself, does this entrance feel like it leads somewhere? Or does it feel like it stops here? If it feels like an endpoint, you have work to do. Add light, create vertical movement with plants, open windows to the rear, keep the path clear and uncluttered. Do this consistently, and within weeks you may notice changes, not because of magic, but because you've altered the conditions under which momentum can occur. When energy moves freely into and through your home, you move more freely through your life. And the results of that, more focus, more flow, more fulfillment, often follow faster than you expect. Section 3. Misplaced water features. Water has long been a symbol of wealth, emotion, and movement. But in the context of home design, especially within classical Feng Shui, not all water is beneficial, and certainly not when it is placed in the wrong sector of the property. While water features are often associated with affluence, glimmering backyard pools, serene koi ponds, indoor fountains that whisper abundance, what many home owners don't realize is that the directional placement of water can dramatically alter its energetic impact. Specifically, when water elements like pools, fountains, or aquariums are placed in the west or northwest sectors of a property, they can begin to interfere with the domain of metal energy, which in Feng Shui corresponds to clarity, precision, structural integrity, and long-term planning. Metal symbolically is strong, clear, and decisive. Water, while beneficial in many contexts, erodes metal when improperly combined. The result is not dramatic collapse, but subtle erosion, manifesting in recurring expenses, unstable income, poor financial planning, or the inability to retain wealth even when one is technically earning well. People often wonder why, despite high income, they never seem to save, or why windfalls disappear as quickly as they arrive. The answer may lie just outside their windows, in the misplacement of still or excessive water in their western zones. Luxury homes are especially prone to this mistake. In the pursuit of elegance or resort-like aesthetics, designers often prioritize visual symmetry over directional balance. Pools are placed in the back right corner for privacy, or reflective basins are installed to soften sharp lines. But without an understanding of energy flow, these features quickly become traps instead of enhancements. It becomes even worse when the water is stagnant, left unfiltered, growing algae, collecting debris, or simply unused. In such states, water no longer symbolizes flow but blockage, and what should be an emblem of wealth turns into a drain on both energy and resources. If you observe homeowners in these environments, you'll notice familiar patterns. Money arrives but doesn't stay. Investments stall or yield less than expected, and the household budget is constantly being adjusted to accommodate unexpected costs. Repairs, subscriptions, upgrades, and replacements that feel small individually but collectively undermine financial growth. From a psychological standpoint, water represents movement and flexibility, but when placed where structure and stability should dominate, it creates a kind of emotional confusion. The residents may find themselves unable to commit, second-guessing plans, shifting career goals, or lacking follow-through. It's not just money that leaks, but discipline. Families living in these layouts often experience scattered schedules, shifting roles, or a general sense of being busy but going nowhere. Even when success is present, it's unstable, like standing on wet ground with nothing solid beneath you. The home reflects and reinforces that instability, not through dramatic dysfunction, but through quiet inefficiency. And over time, that inefficiency compounds. To correct the imbalance caused by misplaced water features, the first step is to introduce elements that naturally harmonize the water-metal relationship. Wood, in the five-element cycle, absorbs water and controls its influence. Strategically placing controlled wood elements in the affected area can restore balance. Consider using bonsai trees, lucky bamboo, rubber plants, or well-maintained potted trees, each symbolizing growth, stability, and direction. These plants should be healthy, upright, and ideally placed in ceramic or stone planters to ground their energy. Avoid wild, overgrown arrangements. Control and intention are key. Place the plants between the water source and the main structure of the house, creating a soft buffer that filters the energy before it moves inward. In addition to wood, reinforce the metal element itself. Use metallic tones, silver, white, chrome, or brushed steel in nearby decor. This could include outdoor furniture, lighting fixtures, garden sculptures, or even metallic pebbles around the base of water features. These accents strengthen the symbolic integrity of the space and prevent the water from overwhelming it. Circulation is also critical. Water that moves carries energy. Water that sits collects it. If you have a fountain, ensure it runs daily. Use pumps with filters to keep water clean and in motion. For larger pools or ponds, install soft aeration systems that keep the surface gently disturbed. This movement not only enhances energy flow, but also prevents physical stagnation, which has a direct psychological effect. Movement at the surface encourages movement in the mind. You'll notice the difference quickly. Decisions become clearer, days feel more productive, and money starts to behave more logically. It's also important to maintain physical cleanliness around the water area. Debris, mildew, rusted plumbing, or broken lighting all contribute to a sense of energetic neglect. Keep the area pristine, not perfect, but obviously cared for. In the same way you would never leave your office desk in disarray while trying to solve a major problem. Don't leave the water zone chaotic if you're aiming for financial growth. The shape of the water feature also matters. Round or oval shapes are generally more harmonious than sharp-cornered basins. If your pool is rectangular, consider softening its edges with curved landscaping or circular stepping stones nearby. Avoid features that point toward the house, especially from the west, as they symbolically direct water, and thus instability, toward your foundation. Lighting around the water should be subtle and warm, never harsh or overly blue, which can exaggerate the water's cooling, dampening effects. Soft golden lighting from the sides or slightly underneath can lift the area visually and energetically, making it feel more alive and less consuming. If relocating a water feature isn't possible, and in most cases it isn't, then the goal is not to remove, but to rebalance. Think of water as a guest that needs guidance. Without structure, it will spread without purpose. With the right surrounding elements, it becomes a source of beauty and flow. The solution is not elimination, but orchestration. Redirect its influence so it supports, rather than undermines, the part of your home responsible for clarity, boundaries, and financial holding power. It's worth noting that not all water in the West is problematic. Small, well-maintained water features, particularly those that are symbolic rather than dominant, can add gentle movement and soft reflection, provided they are accompanied by the right balancing elements. The issue arises when water is large, static, or visually overpowering. In those cases, it behaves like an emotional flood, consuming everything around it. By grounding it with wood, strengthening it with metal, and animating it with motion, you return it to its rightful role, a flexible, supportive presence rather than a destabilizing one. As with all environmental adjustments, the key is intention. Simply placing a plant or installing a pump will not transform your life unless the space is maintained with awareness. Your home listens. It reflects not just what you place in it, but how you interact with it over time. Water, more than any other element, responds to neglect quickly. It mirrors stagnation faster than stone, fire, or wood. That's why its placement and care are so crucial. When water flows with purpose, life begins to align. When it sits without movement, goals begin to stall. Section 4. Low natural light, low clarity. Light is one of the most powerful yet underestimated elements in shaping the energy and functionality of a home. And natural light in particular is more than just a visual feature. It is a silent architect of mental clarity, emotional balance, and even financial awareness. When a space is deprived of consistent daylight, especially during the crucial morning hours, it gradually becomes a well of sluggish energy. And although this stagnation is subtle, it has measurable consequences on the people living within it. The human brain, wired to follow circadian rhythms, depends heavily on the input of natural light to regulate attention, motivation, and cognitive sharpness. When that input is blocked, whether by architectural design, poor window placement, heavy coverings, or sheer neglect, the internal systems that drive optimism, decision-making, and clarity begin to falter. Rooms that are chronically dim or windowless tend to absorb not just shadows, but psychological tension. Individuals living in such spaces often find themselves procrastinating more, sleeping poorly, avoiding long-term planning, and struggling with financial decision-making, not because they lack intelligence or discipline, but because their environment doesn't give their brain the natural signals it needs to function at full capacity. The mind, in absence of light, becomes hesitant, thoughts loop, fears linger longer, and optimism becomes harder to access. Even the simplest tasks feel heavy. This may not seem related to finances at first glance, but if you look closely, it is often in these low-light homes that you find unpaid bills stacked in corners, unopened mail lingering for weeks, budget spreadsheets ignored, and money conversations postponed. The light, or lack thereof, becomes a metaphor for the lack of visibility in financial matters. People often describe feeling foggy or disconnected in these environments, and that fog seeps into the way they evaluate opportunity, risk, and long-term plans. They may avoid bold moves in their career, defer investment decisions, or stay in jobs or partnerships long past their prime, not out of fear, but out of unclear vision. This condition isn't something that changes with a pep talk. It changes with light. The design features that indicate light deprivation are surprisingly common in modern homes. Heavy blackout drapes that remain closed long after the sun is up, windows that have become dusty or neglected, furniture that blocks light's natural path, or an overdependence on artificial overhead lighting without any daylight balance. These features don't just darken a room, they suppress the psychological vitality of its inhabitants. A room without sunlight becomes a room where ideas dim and ambition stalls. Over time, even high-functioning individuals will find themselves becoming passive, distracted, or unfocused. The body mirrors the environment, and so does the financial behavior. This is why restoring natural light isn't a matter of aesthetic, it's a matter of life momentum. The good news is that the solution doesn't always require architectural change. Start with the glass. Clean every window in your house, especially those in common living spaces and work areas. Dust and grime, even when invisible at a glance, subtly dull the transmission of daylight. Once the glass is clear, consider what's blocking the light. Replace heavy curtains with sheer panels, pull drapes fully aside during daylight hours, and trim outdoor foliage that may be casting shadows across your windows. If your home receives sunlight primarily in the morning, open the windows as early as possible. Allow that first light to touch the room and set the tone for your day. Morning light has a unique spectrum that activates serotonin, helping regulate mood and focus. When this becomes a habit, you may notice yourself feeling clearer, more decisive, and even more alert in your finances. You'll tackle that email you've avoided, call that client back, reevaluate that subscription you forgot to cancel. Light motivates movement in rooms that have no access to sunlight, such as bathrooms, interior hallways, or converted basements. The goal is to mimic the natural spectrum as closely as possible. Install full-spectrum daylight LED bulbs, particularly those with a color temperature between 5000 K and 6500 K. These bulbs simulate the quality of natural light and reduce the fatigue often caused by yellow or blue-tinted artificial lighting. Avoid overhead-only sources. Instead, use layered lighting, wall sconces, lamps, backlit panels that create diffusion, eliminating harsh shadows and encouraging the eye to move fluidly around the room. Strategically placed mirrors can also dramatically enhance the perception and reach of natural light. A mirror placed opposite a window can double the perceived size of the window and bounce light deeper into the room. Use large format mirrors or multiple panels to create continuous reflection, especially in narrow hallways or corners that tend to feel dense. Mirrors should be kept clean and unbroken. Symbolically, they are tools of clarity, and damaged or dirty mirrors send mixed signals to the brain. In addition to mirrors, consider light-colored surfaces near windows. Off-white walls, pale flooring, or even reflective decor like brushed metal frames or crystal-based accessories can help scatter light across the space without creating glare. Pay attention to airflow as well. Light travels best in clean, open air. If your windows are open, but the room is filled with heavy fabric, dusty shelves, or cluttered corners, the light gets absorbed instead of amplified. Regularly declutter areas where light hits. These are your activation zones. Treat them like tuning forks for the rest of the house. You will notice that when sunlight lands on a tidy, open surface, the room breathes. It expands. And so does your thinking. Lighting rituals also help reprogram your relationship with space. Try turning on all interior lights after sunset in a specific order, starting from the front door and moving inward. This act, though simple, creates a path of illumination, a symbolic gesture that reinforces movement, visibility, and transition. Similarly, in the early morning, walk through your space slowly as the light begins to rise. Observe how the color and temperature of each room shifts. This awareness, built daily, gradually aligns your internal clarity with the physical reality around you. For those living in apartments with limited window access, consider using transparent or frosted glass dividers to allow borrowed light from brighter rooms to reach deeper corners. Even a small glass panel in a door or an open concept kitchen can dramatically change the way light behaves in the space. Skylights, though a more structural investment, are another excellent option, particularly in kitchens, bathrooms, or hallways that otherwise remain dark for most of the day. If a skylight isn't possible, ceiling-mounted LED panels that mimic natural skylight effects are increasingly accessible and easy to install. These mimic the intensity and spread of real daylight and can be programmed to dim or brighten throughout the day to match circadian rhythms. In all of this, consistency is key. Light is not a one-time fix, it's a living relationship. The more you maintain it, the more it supports you. The more intentional your lighting strategy, the more noticeable the mental and financial clarity becomes. You'll begin to find tasks less draining, budgeting more intuitive, and deadlines easier to meet. Not because your workload changed, but because your environment stopped resisting you. That's the quiet power of light. It doesn't just illuminate your home, it reactivates your clarity, restores your confidence, and gives your best intentions the visibility they need to grow. And in a world filled with complexity, few things are more valuable than that. Section 5, Homes Bought for Image, Not Alignment. In today's world of curated lifestyles, Instagram-worthy interiors, and social status signaling, the pressure to present an ideal life often extends beyond clothing cars, or travel. It seeps into where and how we live. While owning a home is a dream for many, the dream can quietly turn into a burden when the decision is driven more by image than alignment. When people buy homes that stretch beyond their financial comfort zone or choose layouts and decor purely to impress others, they may gain a facade of success, but at the cost of long-term emotional balance and financial security. This type of home may look perfect on paper and stunning in photos, but it rarely feels peaceful to inhabit. It becomes a house of performance, not of presence. And this disconnect between what the space shows and what it truly supports creates an invisible weight that lingers in daily life. You can feel it in the tension when bills arrive, in the hesitation before inviting guests over, in the voice in Shui that says, "I should be further ahead by now." Instead of being a refuge, the home becomes a measuring stick, and every unpainted wall, every missed landscaping appointment, every half-finished decor project becomes a symbol of failure rather than flexibility. You're not living in your space, you're managing it like a brand. The emotional cost is quiet but cumulative. People who live in homes driven by status over alignment often report trouble sleeping, racing thoughts, financial anxiety, or the persistent feeling that they are not doing enough even when they're exhausted. The energy of the house reflects this misalignment. Rooms that go unused but are still fully furnished. Decorative items that have no personal meaning but were chosen because they looked expensive. Closets filled with items bought for show, not for comfort. In these homes, clutter may not be physical, it may be emotional, visual, and energetic. Every square foot feels like it has something to prove. One of the earliest red flags of image-driven ownership is the way a person talks about their home. Do they talk about it as a source of comfort or a source of pride? Do they describe it in terms of Shui and features and upgrades, or in terms of how it supports their daily flow? These distinctions matter because they reveal whether the space is helping or hindering their lifestyle. Another red flag is how many rooms are either avoided or artificially maintained. Are there show areas where no one is allowed to sit? Are there rooms you avoid because they bring up guilt about unfinished renovations or overdue payments? Are you constantly rearranging, repainting, or redecorating, not because it brings joy, but because something always feels off? If so, the issue might not be the furniture. It might be the foundational reason you chose the space in the first place. A home built for identity, rather than integrity, rarely nourishes. It demands more than it gives. And over time, that imbalance wears people down. Financially, these homes become quiet liabilities. Mortgage payments that were once ambitious now feel overwhelming. Maintenance costs creep up. Insurance, property taxes, and upkeep become a recurring source of friction, not just in the budget, but in your mental bandwidth. You begin cutting back in areas that actually matter: travel, education, health, in order to maintain an image that no longer feels aligned with who you are. This behavior is more common than most people realize. It's not a matter of greed or vanity, it's often rooted in a belief that worth must be proven, that success must be seen, and that a home should project confidence even if it doesn't generate it internally. And yet, ironically, the most financially resilient homes are often the ones built or chosen with modesty, functionality, and emotional intelligence in mind. They may not be the biggest or most modern, but they are structured to support, not to strain. They allow their owners to rest deeply, focus clearly, and invest wisely, not just in the property, but in life itself. So what can be done if you find yourself living in a space that looks great on the outside, but no longer fits your true needs inside? The answer is not always to sell or move, although in some cases that may eventually become necessary. The first step is to reclaim authenticity within the space. Start small. Identify one or two objects that you bought purely for appearances. These might be trendy wall art, a piece of furniture that's never used, or decorative accents that feel disconnected from your personality. Remove them, not out of punishment, but as an act of clearing. In the space they leave behind, add something that supports you. This could be a reading nook with a chair you actually love to sit in, a corner with a plant that's easy to care for, a framed photo that brings a genuine smile. The goal is not to make the space look better, but to make it feel truer. Over time, these adjustments shift the emotional narrative of the house. It stops being a museum of projected success and starts becoming a sanctuary of lived success. You'll find yourself relaxing more, breathing more deeply, and even making clearer financial choices. You'll spend less on impulse and more on intention. You'll be more willing to invite people into your space, not to impress them, but to connect with them. Another practical adjustment is to audit the parts of your home that feel heavy. This doesn't mean physically heavy, but energetically. Walk through your home with a notebook and note any area where you feel tension, guilt, or disconnection. For example, a home office that never gets used but still costs money to maintain. A formal dining room you only use for photos, or a primary suite that feels more like a showroom than a space for rest. Ask yourself, if no one else could see this room, would I still keep it this way? If the answer is no, then consider how to redesign it for function over form. A rarely used dining room can become a creative studio. An unused formal sitting area can become a daily journaling or meditation zone. You don't have to follow the original intent of the architect or the expectations of the neighborhood. You only have to follow what supports your life now. This shift in approach doesn't just reduce financial pressure, it also builds internal strength. When you stop performing your home and start personalizing it, you reclaim authority over your space and your money. You realize that a home doesn't have to prove anything. It only has to work. And when your space is no longer consuming your emotional resources, those same resources become available for things that matter: career growth, quality time, creative pursuits, and above all, peace of mind. You'll notice fewer arguments over money, fewer impulse purchases to compensate for stress, and more joy in the simplest routines. That is the real luxury, not the marble countertop or the oversized staircase, but the ability to live fully and freely in the place you call home. 5. Signs of a prosperous home. Once we've addressed what drains a home's energy, it's just as important to recognize what supports it, because a prosperous home isn't necessarily the biggest or most expensive, but the one that works in harmony with your life and goals. One of the most consistent architectural indicators of a supportive space is high open ceilings. While often considered an aesthetic luxury, open vertical space actually signals to the mind that vision and possibility are expansive. It encourages upward thinking, long-range planning, and a more elevated sense of control. It gives your thoughts room to breathe. If your ceilings aren't naturally high, you can simulate openness by using lighter colors, vertical lines in your decor, and avoiding clutter that pulls the eye downward. Next, take a look at your front door. Not just the design, but how it makes you feel when you come home. A wide, unobstructed entrance tells the world, and your subconscious, that opportunity is welcome. This is your home's handshake to the universe. Doors that are clean, easy to open, and framed with light or greenery tend to draw in better outcomes. If your front entrance is blocked by furniture, dark corners, or even an old doormat, start there. Refresh it. Make it feel like you're inviting something in, not holding it back. Third, a cohesive layout is key to everyday functionality. Homes where you can move freely from one room to the next without sudden dead ends, awkward corridors, or tight transitions tend to support smoother thought patterns and more confident decision-making. In simple terms, The fewer energy traps your home has, the easier it is to get things done. Even in smaller homes, you can enhance flow by arranging furniture to support movement, not restrict it. Make sure your walkways are clear and your rooms aren't working against each other. The fourth marker of a prosperity-ready home is the quality of air and scent. Clean air paired with subtle natural aromas like citrus, eucalyptus, or sandalwood has a direct impact on how your brain functions. Stale, synthetic, or overly perfumed environments lead to sensory fatigue and decision cloudiness. In contrast, homes that smell fresh, because they are fresh, naturally support clear thinking, better focus, and a calm nervous system. Finally, the simplest yet most powerful sign of a prosperous home is care. A space that is maintained with repaired fixtures, watered plants, working bulbs, and clean corners quietly tells life, I'm ready to receive more. Neglected spaces reflect self-neglect. But when you care for your home, even in small ways, you activate an energy of readiness. That alone can shift your entire trajectory, because prosperity doesn't just follow potential, it follows preparation. And when your space reflects that, everything else begins to align. Final. In the end, your home is more than a collection of walls, floors, and furniture. It's a living reflection of what you believe you deserve. It's not just a place where life happens. It's a silent co-author in how your life unfolds. A home that supports you uplifts your decisions, your emotions, and your momentum. A home that drains you shows up in fatigue, friction, and missed opportunities. And after observing and studying hundreds of homes over the years, I've learned something that still surprises me. People don't always change first. Spaces do. When you make even a small shift in your environment, your mindset starts to shift with it. You become more intentional, more clear, and more grounded. And from that place, your choices improve, your habits refine, and your fortune starts to follow. So tonight, I invite you to walk through your home, not as the person who lives there, but as someone seeing it for the first time. Pay attention to what energizes you and what quietly takes something away. Don't judge it, just observe. And then start with one small change. Clean a forgotten corner. Open a window you haven't touched in months. Replace one item that doesn't feel like you anymore. Because change doesn't start big, it starts real. And if this video helped you see your space in a new way, I invite you to share it with someone who might need it too. Leave a comment below. I'd love to know what shift you're making first, or what transformation you have already experienced. And if you'd like to go deeper with me on this journey, please subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Your support will help me reach 2,000 subscribers and allow me to keep bringing you thoughtful, high-quality content that honors the quiet but powerful connection between your environment and your well-being. Until next time, take care of your space, and it will take care of you.